In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved. And now we lie in Flanders fields, take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر
pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. It's Duane's birthday today, so he will join us later for an interview. And it's Remembrance Day as well. You heard at the beginning of the show the last post and Rose. But more importantly as well today, a very fitting Leonard Cohen, a monument of the Canadian music and literacy scene, has passed away last night. And what you heard was Leonard Cohen reading in Flanders Field. It's Remembrance Day as well. There's a lot of tie-in between the world of soccer and Remembrance Day being a sport that was played, and the fact that it was truce in the World Cup and all that. There's a story that I want to talk about. First of all, the show today, we will have later on Gavin Day of yahoo.co.uk, who is in, well, yahoo.ca as well, who is in South Korea as we speak, was at the game today, but we talked to him last night or early morning for him in South Korea, where he talked about the Hex, Canada, they're friendly, where the program's going, where the Hex is going, where the continent is going. So stay tuned to Soccer Today later on to hear about the Hex and U.S. men's national team. Big weekend of game. And after the interview, we will talk about the European qualifiers for Russia 2018. That wraps up today. Big game, big derby, quote unquote. Scotland England in London at Wembley will be very interesting. But because it's Remembrance Day, and I was thinking earlier on, and what can we do? And we all heard, or maybe if you haven't, there's a big soccer moment in World War One that happened on Christmas, and I think it's fitting to lay the story out for you today on this special show. Remember to here on Soccer Today. Here is the story. It's taken from ESPN FC.US, published on Christmas 2014. The article written by Simon Cooper. Let's listen. Kurt Zemmisch was a German lieutenant in the First World War. He disappeared forever in the Soviet Union in the Second. In 1999, his son Rudolf found his dad's diary in the attic. This is what Zemmisch Sr. recorded for Christmas Day, 1914. Quote, "A couple of Britons brought a ball along from their trenches, and a lively game began. How fantastic, wonderful, and strange. The English officers experienced it like that too. That thanks to soccer and Christmas, the feast of love, deadly enemies briefly came together as friends. It was one of several impromptu soccer match played between British and German soldiers in no man's land that Christmas. For one day, and in some sectors of the line for several days, the enemies made a spontaneous peace. A century on, these games transfixed Europeans. Quote, we all grew up with the story of soldiers from both sides putting down their arms on Christmas Day, quote, says Prince William, president of the English Football Association. No wonder, because this extraordinary story suggests an alternative history of the 20th century. Many people, including some veterans of the war, have doubted that these games were ever played. The story seems too good to be true. Indeed, Jeff Dyer, in his 1994 book, quote, The Missing of the Sum, dismisses it as a myth. Some historians believe the truth is somewhere in between. Others contend that the impact of the game has been overstated, as we witnessed the Premier League and FA, among other organizations, commemorate the moment. But based on a slew of books and other sources, I believe that Christmas matches happened. They are described in dozens of letters, regimental histories, diaries, contemporary British newspaper, and post-war memoirs. They are commemorated in the Flanders Field War Museum in Ypres, Belgium. Authoritative books by the American historian Stanley Weintraub, emeritus professor at Penn State University, and by the German writer Michael Jürgs, and a joint history by Michael Brown and Shirley Seaton have described the Christmas truce. According to all sources, the following narrative emerges. The troops had gone to war in August 1914, expecting to be home by Christmas. That didn't happen. Many, in fact, would never come home. By Christmas 1914, stunning modern killing machine had left about 750,000 people dead. In December, the German High Command, hoping to boost morale, sent thousands of little Christmas trees to the trenches. The aim was to keep the soldiers' heart in the battle. Instead, it had the opposite effect. Christmas highlighted similarities between Christian nations. In opposite trenches, when German soldiers at La Chapelle d'Armentières in France sang the carol Stille Nacht, the original of the English Silent Night, with the same tune, a British regiment shouted for more. Near the French village Fleurbaix, British soldiers in their trenches saw Christmas tree hung with lights advancing into no man's land. The Germans were making a seasonal gesture. The Brits responded. As well as sharing Christmas, the soldiers had gotten to know the enemy. In some spots, the trenches were barely 50 meters apart. You could see the enemy soldiers shaving in the morning. Often, there were informal truces while stretcher bearers went around the no man's land collecting the dead. Few French or Belgian regiments participated in the Christmas truce. They had more reason than the Brits to hate the Germans who had invaded their countries. But for hundreds of miles along the British-German lines, there was fraternization. It began spontaneously and slightly differently in each sector, and yet a coherent story emerges. Germans would raise sheets with text scrawled on them like, "You no shoot, we no shoot." A head would pop up above the parapet. Suddenly, German soldiers would be walking into no man's land. Britons left their trenches to meet them. Everywhere, enemies shook hands, wished each other Merry Christmas, and arranged not to shoot the next day. Together, they fantasized about the war dissolving in a burst of brotherhood. In the surviving photographs, one of which appeared in several British newspapers on January 8, 1915, they still stand huddled together in no man's land. They all wear mustaches, thick coat, and scarves. Smoke rises from the German cigars they are sharing. They also shared Christmas dinners, promised to meet again after the war, and wondered why they were fighting. Britons donned German helmets. Germans sang God Save the King. Some Germans told stories of working as waiters, barbers, or taxi drivers in pre-war Britain. "Good morning, sir," a German said to a British lance corporal. "I lived at Alexander Road, Hornsey, and I would see Woolwich Arsenal play Tottenham tomorrow." How do men without a common language expresses friendship? They play soccer. Christmas kickabouts erupted across no man's land. After German and Scottish soldiers had finished their game, inevitably, the Germans won, one German produced a camera. The players of both teams gathered in a group. Always beautiful colored rows, the ball in the middle. Recalled the Saxon lieutenant, Johannes Niemann. The Scots were wearing kilts, and as the Saxon had discovered to their glee during the match, wore no underpants. Sadly, the best team photograph ever has disappeared, unless it's still moldering in somebody's attic. The games weren't serious. One lasted only an hour, after which both teams were exhausted. And though corpses had been cleared from the battlefield earlier that day, shell holes and the soldiers' huge boots made close control impossible. Players who fell in the mud were pulled out by the enemy to cheers from spectators perched on the parapets. Goalposts were made of a couple of pieces of wood or caps or helmets, writes Yerkes. Ernie Williams in 1914, a British soldier in the 6th Cheshire Regiment, told the BBC TV program Grandstand 69 years later, quote, "It was just a general kickabout. I should think we were about a couple of hundred taking part. I was pretty good then, at 19. Will between us. It was simply a melee, nothing like the soccer you see on television. The boots were with a menace, those great big boots we had on, and in those days, the balls were made of leather, and they soon got very soggy." Not everyone liked the truce. Superior officers on both sides stopped it within days. The British Brigadier C.M. Richards, also quoted by Weintraub, recalled in a post-war memoir having received a signal from battalion headquarters on Christmas Day, quote, "telling me to make a soccer pitch in no man's land by filling up shell holes, etc., and to challenge the enemy to a match on the 1st of January. I was furious and took no action at all. I wish I had kept that signal. Stupidly, I destroyed it. I was so angry. It would have been a good souvenir." Quote. A 25-year-old German soldier named Adolf Hitler was equally shocked by the truce in Weintraub account. He had spent Christmas Day in the cellar of an abbey near Ypres, Belgium. Told later that men of his regiment had played soccer with them, he exclaimed, "Something like that should not happen in wartime. Have you no German honor?" German regimental histories written under Nazism do not mention the truth. This month, Britain in particular are remembering the soccer games of Christmas 1914. Indeed, the British Council found that over 2/3 of British adults knew about them. Schools around Britain are playing commemorative matches. Earlier this month, before every English professional game, all 22 starting players posed for a group photograph, recalling the picture of German and British soldiers posing together. You can see why people remember. The Christmas truth offers a glimpse of an alternative history. A 20th century in which, starting at Christmas 1914, everyone stops shooting and starts playing soccer. Then we had no Russian Revolution in 1917, no future for Lance Corporal Hitler, no Stalingrad Auschwitz, or the divided Europe of the Cold War. Christmas 1914, writes Weintraub, suggests an unrealized potential to burst its seams and rewrite a century. The soccer player of that day, most of them probably dead by 1918, would have wanted it. There's one other thing to say about the Christmas soccer. To the soldiers chasing balls amid shell holes that day, one fact was obvious. Soccer wasn't war. In fact, it was its opposite. Yet until that Christmas, the British consensus had been that soccer was a sort of war. The traditional idea was that sports bred the manliness and team spirit required for the greater game of war. Long after peace had returned to Europe, many European newspaper and soccer men still talked about soccer as if it were a kind of war. Bobby Robson, English manager from 1982 to 1990, eulogized his captain Brian Robson with imagery straight from the First World War. You could put him in any trench and know he'd be the first over the top. He wouldn't think, well, Christ, if I put my head up there, it might get shot off. This sort of talk wasn't just an English disorder. Sepp Herberger, who coached West Germany to victory at the 1954 World Cup, wrote, "A good soccer player is also always a good soldier." West Germany's great striker during the 1970s, Gerd Müller, was nicknamed the Bomber. This kind of talk has almost died out now. Nobody uses military metaphors to eulogize Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, and nobody still likens the German team to Panzer tanks. We now remember Christmas 1914 in part because we're returning to its vision. War is war, and soccer is something much better.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And welcome back to Soccer Today. Joining us on the line from Korea is Gavin Day. Korea, how you doing over there? What's the experience been so far in the Republic of Korea, Gavin?
It's been so brief that I've only had a small taste of things so far. It's been chilly. It's been a bit rainy, but I mean, Cheonan, where the game is, it's not Seoul, so I don't think it's as sort of touristy. So literally there's not really much English anywhere apart from, street signs and stuff. So going to get food is an interesting experience when I don't have any idea what I'm getting.
Fair enough. I noticed on Twitter you had a photograph of what looked like a chicken bone or something. Did you end up eating that, the wrapped chicken wing or chicken bone?
I did not. Yeah, there are a few places that would have sort of drumsticks or legs, essentially vacuum sealed and on the rack in convenience stores. But I haven't gotten that desperate yet. But still got a couple more days, I guess. All
right. I wonder with someone that travels as much as you. One quick question in the travelogue here, and then we'll get into the meat of the actual soccer. Do you still get jet lagged? You travel so much that I wonder whether you have some kind of universal time that your body stays on.
It's been a while since I've sort of gone anywhere. So, when I first got here, I sort of fell asleep and got maybe 4 hours. Last night, I think I got a full night. So I think I've adapted, which I feel like I can adapt relatively quickly. But my body always sort of feels like it's in a permanent state of flux that I've no idea where or when I am, and that hurts it back at home. So I honestly can't answer that because I think I'm just confused all the time.
All right, fair enough. Gavin, when I requested Gavin, I was like, I'll ask for Gavin. And then I realized 10 minutes later that it was midnight when I sent it to you. So sorry about that. All right, let's get to the actual game. You were able to catch Canada in training. And when this interview airs, of course, the game will be over. So we'll keep this relatively general. But what is the mood around this team right now? Obviously, a couple months removed from the elimination for World Cup qualifying on the eve of the Hex starting. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, what is the mood, the general feeling around these players that are still turning up for Canada now?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you sort of see them in a camp, they're they're always glad to be in with the national program. It's a fun environment for them to be in. They obviously log quite a few travel miles getting games sort of here, there, and everywhere. But they're always focused. They always like to play, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now. They don't know sort of where the program's headed in light of, the end of Benito Floro. For all we know, Michael Finley, they've said is Canada Soccer said that he was going to take the October-November camps. Whether he continues, we still don't know. So I think they're really hoping that there's some sort of stability coming in the next little bit so that there's a vision on where they're going to go, where they're going to play, and how they're going to play. So, it's not sort of as relaxed as I've seen in the past, but the guys are always still just happy to put the jersey on and go out and try to get results.
Speaking of travel miles, on the last two international break, Canada played some friendlies in Morocco and now in South Korea. What is the thought of the program with those friendlies? Because you mentioned there were doubts and uneasiness of looking for the future, the post Benito Floro, like specifically the player personnel who's going to be chosen more often, or the player is going to be back in the fold. What's the feeling heading to the unknown of the future, having experienced two international breaks where friendlies were played, but a different group or a different roster each time and a different approach to those games? What's the thought heading into next year?
Yeah, I mean, this camp in South Korea, I was told that it was an invite from the KFA to get Canada out here. Obviously, Canada played Uzbekistan in May in Austria, and apparently that was behind the thought process with Korea having a big World Cup qualifier against Uzbekistan on Tuesday. So that's why Canada was sort of brought in here, and from what I was told, that the way the international sort of calendar was this month, it would have been tough to find games with so many qualifiers in progress. But I still think there were other teams that were available, but they got the invite and they jumped at the opportunity. So, it's just kind of strange a little bit with guys coming in and going out, and it is good that Canada's getting the games, I suppose, but at this moment it just seems like it's getting games to get games, and it's so tough right now with things the way they are, and the guys seem to be sort of handling it as well as possible. They just want to get an extra 90 minutes in with the guys, and they know things like Gold Cup are on the horizon. So it will start to feel a little bit more real, I think, at the turn of the year when we will officially be in that Gold Cup year, and they know that it is still an important competition for them to get results, because it's been a long time since Canada's sort of picked up even a win in that tournament.
My thought is, because Gavin, when you have big travel and big camps like this abroad with the roster, it's a bonding moment. It's a moment that creates a team, that builds a team and helps a selection become a team. But now having this with an interim coach and players that are not necessarily going to be called upon when it matters in Gold Cup or World Cup qualifiers, is it like opportunity wasted in a minute? Should have Canada Soccer Association went with the new coach now to take advantage of those two trips around the world to get that bonding and movement, to get that selection to a team?
I see what you're saying, but I mean, the way the international game is, the squad always changes from camp to camp, and I mean, since there was together such little time, they're abroad a lot anyway, so I don't think there's any sort of worry that the guys will rally together, having experienced that group enough that I know that they do come together and bond really quickly, regardless of who's involved. So, Canada is obviously taking its time. They want to find the right full-time coach, but I do think that there needs to be someone full-time in before the Gold Cup as soon as possible, so that they can, if they do a January camp, if they do a March camp, if they do a June camp, they can start to build that familiarity with the coach, because in my opinion, this is a very important Gold Cup next summer.
Well, no doubt they need to get some confidence back in the program. The other side of it, Gavin, and I wonder this when I see opponents like South Korea on the docket, is whether Canada needs to start booking friendlies with their FIFA ranking in mind, because that will come into play when it comes to seeding and so on and so forth for the next World Cup cycle. It seems weird to be talking about it before Russia's not even close to being done, but nonetheless, currently 111th in the world. They'll be lower. They'll probably be in the 120s in the next ranking just because of the way it works. Should they maybe be avoiding teams like Korea and looking to try and just get some points, regardless of how you can do it against smaller nations for a while, to get the confidence up as well?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with the ranking, it's, friendlies. Canada plays fewer competitive games than most countries. I think we've had this discussion. Canada will get the bulk of its ranking points at the Gold Cup and at World Cup qualifying. And Canada's ranking has really been hampered by no victories over FIFA opponents since, 2009? Because they beat Guadeloupe in 2011, and that didn't count to the rankings because Guadeloupe's not a FIFA nation. So, playing sort of lesser teams won't exactly help the rankings that much. It might obviously a little bit, but the important thing is that Canada has to win, at least one game in the next Gold Cup, and that will give the ranking a big shot in the arm. The friendlies can only help so much. It's the competitive games that matter for them.
When you're looking at the Hex now, it's coming to an opening this weekend. How bittersweet is it to watch Canada in a friendly when they were so close, at least closer than 7 goals? This time around, it was just a few.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, you sort of look at who's involved, and U.S. and Mexico obviously are there, and it would have been cool. I mean, obviously for a guy like me who's who freelances and covers this team regularly, it would have been great to have 2 World Cup qualifiers. I think they both would have been home, and it's always a taste of what might have been. So it was admittedly very close. That game in Honduras, yes, Honduras dominated, but it was still a 2-1 game, and in the 90th minute, Canada still was one chance away from knocking a point out of that and being within touching distance. So it's very bittersweet, especially when the friendlies that Canada's getting these days are a long ways away, so far away from the fans, and they stream the games but don't really sort of promote them that much. And it would have been cool to have 2 home games in Canada on national television. I think the spotlight would have been massive, and it's very, very bittersweet.
It's hard to get motivated to get up at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to go to CanadaSoccer.com to watch a game on a YouTube stream, but I'll be there because I'm a trooper. Gavin's more of a trooper. He's actually there at any rate. I'm going to ask one sort of segue question, then we're going to talk a little bit about the Hex in general. You reported on your Twitter feed anyway the other day that Julian de Guzman had undergone some successful surgery. Can you maybe just give us an update on that and whether you think JDG is perhaps ready to announce his retirement soon?
Yeah, I mean, I know the knee injury that he had, which kept him out of action when Canada was knocked out from World Cup qualifying, eventually needed an operation. I think there was just something that he finally decided to get done. And I don't know. I mean, we assume that he is going to step aside. He all but said it after the El Salvador game in Vancouver, where he said, he's going to likely look at things beyond playing next season. So I assume it's just a matter of time. But with a guy like Julian, he for all we know, he might still want to go one more year. But I can't speak to that effect. But the operation is done. I've heard he feels good, but we'll see what the next couple of weeks can bring.
Yeah, fair enough. The Ottawa Fury version of Julian de Guzman has been a refreshing thing to see. A guy that I had a lot of time for early in his career, I think, becoming a statesman. That was nice to see, and hopefully he'll remain involved. But let's move our attention now to the teams that are still playing for real competitions here, and that, of course, the Hex here in this part of the world. And the biggest game of the Hex cycle every year is USA-Mexico. It will go tonight in Columbus, obviously. How do you see that matchup right now? Where do you see the power ranking? Is the U.S. on top? Should they be the favorite, or do you think that the Mexicans are too loaded right now?
I think the U.S. actually has a lot to prove. Mexico is such a strong team. They had that poor finish to the Copa Americas last year, and then they just sort of walked around for 90 minutes against Honduras in that 0-0 draw in September. So, I mean, Mexico is the team to beat in the region right now. I think the U.S., there are questions, and we'll see what Jurgen Klinsmann can do, because the U.S. has a very tough first couple games in this round. They're at home in Columbus, which has been good historically for them against Mexico, but I think the U.S. would be happy to just sort of get some points off that. If there's one, take it and go, because then they go on the road to Costa Rica. And as we know, playing in Central America is a big difference from playing at home. And so playing in Costa Rica is going to be tough for the U.S. after a tough home game. So Mexico is, like I said, the team to beat.
In the three teams that we haven't barely mentioned yet in the Hex, TNT, Honduras, and Panama, is there a chance that somebody else in Honduras might get that fourth spot? Let's face it, top three will be U.S., Mexico, and Costa Rica. Who in Honduras, Panama, and TNT can pull an upset?
It's always tough to handicap. I mean, Costa Rica might not even be a sure thing. The U.S. might not even be a sure thing. You just never know with the way this format is. But since they play so many games, you're right. You do think that the U.S., Costa Rica, Mexico will be the teams to rise to the top. But I mean, it's amazing because Honduras at the start of the competition, people sort of said they might be a team that Canada could pick off. And there's not much confidence in Honduras in the national program right now, but here they are. And, after the first sort of round of games, it will be interesting to see who is sort of where they are. And honestly, I think Panama might be a team that can come close. I mean, they were within seconds of reaching 4 years ago. That I think there is enough carryover that they could maybe make a push for that fourth spot, that playoff spot. But Honduras has done this before. They've made a few World Cups, and they know sort of what needs to be done. And frankly, playing in San Pedro Sula, I think, is perhaps one of the most underrated hostile atmospheres in world soccer. It is just spectacular, and that home crowd can help carry them to some wins that might be draws. So of the two, I think Honduras and Panama are the teams to beat. Stephen Hart's Trinidad, you never know, but they're a team that's missed the Gold Cup next year. I don't think they're in the right form, at least this month, to get some results. And if they sort of drop 2 games at home to Costa Rica and then go off to lose in Honduras, then 0 points out of 2 games, bottom of the table, and they'll be right behind the 8 ball. So I think it's Honduras or Panama. If it's my gut, it's Panama, but there are a lot of games still to play.
Just touch on Mexico just 1 second. You mentioned the USA with the tough schedule of having Mexico at home and then traveling to Costa Rica. Mexico is playing United States on the road and then traveling to Panama on the road as well. How difficult will it be to Mexico to even get 2 results in those 2 games?
It's always going to be tough for them in the U.S. There's, of course, the history of 2-0, which the American fans love to bring up all the time. And then going to Panama, which, can be a tough place to play. But Mexico is such a strong team, obviously, technically, tactically, but mentally as well, that they won't be fazed going to either location. I think they'll enjoy playing, and especially if they get off on the right foot with a good performance against the U.S., I think it could be a still comfortable win in Panama.
Gavin, I want to talk with Stephen Hart real quickly. Obviously, a person you have a lot of familiarity with. Did you, when we were sort of saying goodbye to Mr. Hart after the famous game that I'm not going to say the score of again for the 1,000th time, did you have any anticipation that he could have bounced back and found himself in the Hex for another country?
No. I always sort of looked at, wondered why Hart was never in contention for something like an MLS job. I would have thought he would have had the resume to get it. That would have been my instinct to see him get in. But then, kudos to Trinidad for taking him on. And they have had talented players. And Stephen Hart is certainly a great man manager. He's liked by players and staff that he's coached with. And I would not have expected, honestly, to see them back in the Hex with him coaching. But, kudos to them. He's really gotten the most out of his team and got some really good performances, especially considering sort of the financial constraints that have been evident with the TNT FA. he's done a very good job, and especially obviously he's from Trinidad, so it's another home country for him, and that certainly helps to motivate him. But if when he was hired, I would have thought he would have had them in the Hex. My instinct would have said no, but here we are.
Yeah, I think a lot of Canadian national team fans are taking the Trinities as their team in the Hex because of Hart. He is genuinely a nice guy too to deal with. So good to see him successful there, but kind of shocking. And also shocking was what happened in the Gold Cup qualifying, where, as you just said a minute ago, they're not in there, and I might have to investigate that a little bit more next week. For a final question on this before we let you get back and enjoy what you can in your very brief visit to the Republic of Korea. You mentioned San Pedro Sula and the atmosphere that's there. You've had the experience, a unique experience amongst most people to have traveled in most of CONCACAF. You sort of indicated that might be the second most hostile or the first most hostile environment you've been in. But can you just talk about the other Central American visits that will be there? Well, how difficult is it to play in a place like Costa Rica, like Panama?
Yeah, my experience in Costa Rica has only been with the under-17 women when they played in admittedly, pretty empty national stadium there. So that's what I'm looking forward to getting to see one day. I would love to see a national team qualifier there. It's a very nice facility, the national stadium. It was one of those ones where it was a quote unquote gift from China that Costa Rica had built, but it's a very nice facility. A place like Panama, it's the conditions that really get to you at night. It can still be really sort of sticky and muggy and a bit oppressive, but there the fans are. That's where the beer sprays happen in Panama, where when the goals are scored, you see beer tossed in front of the camera. So it's a quirky region. It's an underappreciated region. There's, you're never short on experiences. Like I mentioned, Honduras, it helps with the stadium, the Olímpico Metropolitano, which isn't an old facility, but it looks like it's a very old facility, and it's just not exactly maintained that well. But that just adds to the allure, and the people in these Central American countries with the buildings and the surfaces and the conditions, and then you pile on manic fan support. It's a tough place for any team to play, and you look at how Canada has done there historically with a drought of results. The conditions and the environment certainly play a factor.
And that's why it's good that the under-20s are down there in a camp. And I think, Gavin, you and I agree that the national team should probably get down into that region in whatever way that they can to play something in the near future to try and prepare themselves a little bit more for the days ahead. We won't get you to give a prediction because the game will be over when we hear this. But you enjoy your day over there, Gavin, and we thank you for your time as always.
Thanks. Have a good night, guys.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. And we're back. Thanks to Gavin Day live from South Korea. 2-0 is the result of that game. South Korea 2, Canada 0. Duane's notes from the game, because Duane was up very early this morning on Canada Soccer's YouTube page to watch that game. Korea was obviously the vastly superior team in that game. In particular, they were faster, quicker, and smarter on the runs. Made our backline look like a U4 game when our puppy ran onto the field. I question the logic of playing games right now against teams that are much better. Play Jamaica 6 times before the Gold Cup if that's what it has to be. That would be more productive. The score does not reflect the game because in the second half, South Korea did lift the foot off the pedal just a little bit to not embarrass Canada, which traveled around the world to make that friendly happen. 2-0 flatters the result. Those are Duane's note on the game. If you would like to rewatch the game, it is available on canadasoccer.com. Other games happening in the World Cup qualifiers yesterday in the CONMEBOL. A few interesting results. Colombia-Chile, big game in round 1. 0-0. Venezuela-Bolivia, 5-0 for Venezuela. Uruguay-Ecuador, 2-1. Paraguay-Peru, 4-1 for Peru. But the result that gets people's attention this morning, Brazil 3, Argentina 0. Messi and company were blanked in Brazil. Neymar gets the first round. Very interesting here. A lot of big games today as well in the world of World Cup qualifiers in Europe and across the rest of the world. Honduras, Panama, and CONCACAF, Northern Ireland, Azerbaijan, England, Scotland, Libya, Tunisia, USA, Mexico tonight, 8:01 p.m. Eastern. This big game live from Colombia's Mapfre Stadium. Malta, Slovenia, Denmark, Kazakhstan, Slovakia, Lithuania, France, Sweden. Very interesting. The post-Zlatan era for Sweden. France versus Sweden. Czech Republic, Norway, San Marino, Germany, Armenia, Montenegro, Romania, Poland. Those are the big game today. Games as well Saturday, especially in Europe and in Africa and in Asia, as well as next week. We will talk about next week's game next week. But in the CONCACAF, in the region that is directly concerning us, Honduras, Panama, TNT, Costa Panama. There's only one, Gavin, so it's Honduras, Panama. TNT, Trinidad and Tobago versus Costa Rica, and United States versus Mexico. Interesting if Panama can pull an upset on the road at Estadio Olímpico in Honduras. Can Costa Rica win in TNT in Hazley Crawford Stadium? Will the U.S. continue the 2-0 story at Mapfre Stadium? That's another very good question, and it's something we will have to keep an eye on. A lot of people are saying that the United States are the favorite. They have the historical edge on the stadium. It'll be interesting to see the ramification tonight of all the week that leads to the game. The election, the feeling of USA and Mexico, how people think is going to unite, and it'll be interesting. Let's just put it that way. And in Europe, a lot of games here. We're not going to talk all about them, but England, Scotland tonight. Kind of fitting that it's on Remembrance Day this afternoon for us here at 2:45 Eastern at Wembley, England, Scotland. It's been a while since Scotland beat England. Will it start today? Probably not. Gareth Southgate, the interim manager for England, maybe he's doing something good. We'll see. Rooney is actually more fit this time around than last time. Rooney will be the captain. He's obviously the captain of England. It's going to be an interesting game, Scotland. You all saw the picture of the Scottish fans on the early morning train on their way to London, especially with the mannequin challenge. I know it's the biggest craze, but yeah, you're not going to see me do a mannequin challenge. I don't know. I maybe called me. Anyways, a nice attempt with their quote unquote orange juice at 8 a.m. in the morning. You know, the type of orange juice that you get in a can? Yeah, that's the type of orange juice that we're drinking in that train on their way to London to watch the England versus Scotland game. San Marino, Germany. Germany is going to walk all over San Marino. That is for sure. A game that interests me and interests the fan of the Montreal Impact is Sunday. Belgium, Estonia. Belgium played a friendly earlier this week versus the Netherlands. Interestingly enough, it was a 1-1 game. One of the biggest topic coming out of this game is the play of Laramee of the Montreal Impact, how he played a great role on the backline of Roberto Martinez's team and was able to get it done and was one of the best player for Belgium on that day. And that is very interesting, the level that he's playing, what brings to Montreal Impact. We all know the level he's playing, but how it actually fits in Roberto Martinez's plan now, it reflects well on MLS, on the Montreal Impact, on the Lassima as a player, and it's just fun to finally get one player playing internationally at the highest level. The same for Oyongo and Johan Venegas. Johan Venegas plays for Costa Rica. We'll see if he gets minute with Costa Rica today and next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is versus Mexico in Costa Rica. And you have Oyongo playing for Cameroon in the World Cup qualifiers this Saturday. So a lot of interesting factor for the Montreal Impact with players playing. They're playing against Zambia, Cameroon. So if you want to watch that game is Saturday at 4 p.m. on Bois Oyongo. We'll probably be playing for Cameroon on that day. So a lot of international break flavor this time around in the playoff, especially on the Montreal Impact side. And for Toronto FC, their future rival on November 22nd and 30th, by the way, over 40,000 tickets sold now for November 22nd at the Olympic Stadium. Get yours while they're there, because a few days from now, I'll be sold out. If you wait until Saturday night, Sunday, might be too late. Get yours while you still can. But this Two Solitudes Derby that's going to start on November 22nd, it's fun that you see players from both sides being involved in this international break. Kind of evens itself out a little bit. Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore, obviously. And while Javinko's snub by the Italian national team is probably beneficial for Toronto, but Josie and Michael will be interesting to see them play tonight for the U.S. men's national team. Now, you're wondering, what's the plan for next week? We have a few guests booked Monday to talk about the U.S. men's national team game and the international break. We have Brian Dunsett, former U.S. men's national team player, now writes and talks about the beautiful game. And we have a plethora of other interviews booked as well for Tuesdays and Wednesday. The NASL, the championship, the Soccer Bowl is this weekend, Sunday. The New York Cosmos, St. John's University versus the Indy 11. Will the Indy 11 get their first championship just a few seasons in the league? Or will the Cosmos continue their dominant run on the NASL? Is it the last Soccer Bowl? Is it the last installment of the Soccer Bowl the way it is? All questions that we can't answer right now. But it is a championship game. It is this Sunday. Watch if you can. Not necessarily going to be easy if you're in Canada to watch that game, but there is ways you can probably find to watch that game. So, you're a soccer fan? You like seeing games that a trophy is at stakes? Well, it's this Sunday, the NASL Soccer Bowl, New York Cosmos versus the Indy 11. And until Monday at 11 a.m. for Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.